All right. Welcome to Halitics. So glad to be talking today, Tuesday, and really, really excited to have back on Halitics, friend of Halitics, Andy Ellis. Hey, Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Hal. I guess I'm doing as great as we can in the world that we live in, but it's been some tough times. It's been a tough start to the year so far, but I'm feeling okay today, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining me today, Andy, and exactly what you said, tough times. I wanted to talk to somebody who I has answers that I don't have. In fact, the thumbnail, let me just put it up again real quick, is vote answer is vote green. Question, what do we do now? I think based on the latest foreign policy debacle, whatever you want to call it, I don't know how we can go back to the regular two parties. Your response?
Yeah, I don't ever think there's a time we could go back, whether it was before January 6th, 5 years ago, or whether it was before 3 days ago. Any attempt to go back is really just a sort of conservative attempt by the two parties to go back to a time when things were good for them. And you'll see a lot of that. Like you see the Trump administration talking about making America great going back to, the Monroe Doctrine in the 1800s, and in a lot of ways. And you see the Democrats talking about making America great again by going back to the time when Obama was president. But I think neither of those are really times when it was great. And we have to have a future focus now more than ever in order to be able to figure out how we withstand the imperialism that is upon us and the fascism that is upon us.
Yeah, I'm glad you used those two isms, fascism and imperialism. There it is, vote green. Question, what do we do? Answer, what do we do now? Question. So some people would be listening or watching and saying, Hal, what are you talking about? Trump just committed an illegal action. He kidnapped the lawful president of another country, whatever you want to say. Oh, he wasn't this, what he was the president of that country. He violated international law. So obviously, Hal, we just have to vote Democrat. We have to go back to the Democrats. They're the antidote to this horrible president. Why do you think? Why am I saying no? Wait a second. What Trump is doing proves that both parties are ill-equipped or incapable of governing responsibly.
Well, if you look at most of the way that most of the elected Democrats responded to Trump's law enforcement action, which killed 80 people or so, many of the Democrats are saying Maduro is terrible, but this wasn't the way to take him out. Or they're saying, we wish we had been consulted first. We would have given you permission, of course, but you needed to consult us first. And what these tell you is that the Democratic Party is firmly an imperialist party at this point, entirely in bed with the Trump administration. Trump just is more, I don't know, Elaine Brown says, Trump just bitch slapped the world. And I think that the Democrats kind of don't have the ability to do that. They do it through more covert means, or they keep their mask on or whatever. But they're the same party. They still think that Maduro needed to be replaced. They still think they needed to be consulted. I don't actually know what most of them object to other than Trump did it. I think many of them support this kind of policy. And their actions in the past say so, not just over the last 6 months, not just over the last 6 weeks, but there's been 20 years of sustained economic warfare, 20 plus years of sustained economic warfare against Venezuela and any country that tries to go a more socialist path. And so, Democrats are on board with that as much as Republicans. And I think if the mask is off for anybody right now, it's off for the Democrats, whose response was, why don't you just consult us about this next time?
Here's Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House.
Some members of your caucus have been significantly less critical of Maduro than you just were, and you were in your statement. They've called his capture a kidnapping, and they have treated him as if he's the legitimate leader of the state, whereas both the former and current administrations have said that he is an illegitimate leader of Venezuela. Is it a mistake for Democrats to not support Maduro's removal from power?
I love the way it's framed, right? Is it a mistake? Could it have been a more biased question, a more leading question, a more pro-Trump administration question? But he doesn't have to accept that framing, obviously.
No. What does he say?
And I think that, just before I play it, I would have, a good response would have been, of course we should be. It's not a mistake to challenge this illegal action. And you don't even have to go the whole thing, well, Maduro's so bad. But you make it a good point. You allude to this, Andy. I want to respond that, yeah, there's been, maybe he did lose that election. It looks like independent observers say that after decades of American interference, all manner of economic warfare to make life really, really unpleasant for people in Venezuela.
Support for those opposition parties, right? This is the other thing that we need to understand is that the CIA and the American government has been involved in supporting those opposition parties for a really long time. So it's like if they won a propaganda war at this time, some of it may be the reaction of people in Venezuela to the 20 years of economic decline as a result of economic warfare, but some of it may also be as a result of the fact that the CIA, as they always do, is pumping a bunch of money into the right-wing government there in Venezuela and the right-wing opposition there in Venezuela. And most people don't want that. We can talk about what people want and people don't want in a bit, but it is, none of this is happening in a vacuum without U.S. interference supported by both parties.
All right, let's hear what Hakeem Jeffries has to say in response to that question about the mistake Democrats are making in questioning Trump's action.
I've been very clear about my views in terms of Maduro, his legitimacy, and the fact that he has clearly oppressed the Venezuelan people. We want a bright future for the Venezuelan people. It's a great country that's been decimated by the Maduro regime. Nobody is disputing that. But no one's also disputing the fact that the overwhelming majority of Americans do not support another failed foreign war, putting our men and women in uniform at risk. And the American people certainly do not support the notion that Donald Trump and his cronies like Stephen Miller, who's a joke and a toxic embarrassment, are going to run Venezuela, a country of 30 million people. Are you kidding me?
All right, I'm going to stop it there, but just very weak, nothing, I don't know. He's such a weak speaker. I don't know even where to go with this, Andy, but your reaction.
It's kind of like, what is it that he wants to happen? Like, if you believe what he believes, that Maduro is a dictator who is oppressing the Venezuelan people and needs to be removed from power, what is it that he would like to happen? The status quo is 20 years, or is 20 plus years, multiple failed coups, or 20 plus years of economic warfare in the form of sanctions, multiple failed coups, multiple CIA and foreign involvements in their elections. Like, what is it he would like to happen if that is the position? And that's the thing that I've been wondering with a lot of Democrats. It really seems like the thing that they would like to have happen is that, I guess, like, they get asked about it or something. And it's just, I don't know. It's just such an incoherent approach to the question that wants to center it entirely on Trump and Stephen Miller. And Trump and Stephen Miller are awful, but not on a bipartisan history in Latin America of U.S. involvement and domination in order to push right-wing governments that are susceptible to our oil agenda.
Well, the whole focus is on process, right? You didn't follow the procedures. We would have, it would have been okay if you had, but you didn't. Right. Rather than, no, wait a second, we shouldn't be interfering in this manner. We shouldn't be taking the leaders of countries in prison. We don't have the legal authority to do that. I don't care if there was a warrant issued by a New York federal district court. That's not a court of competent jurisdiction in Venezuela. You want to serve that warrant, go to the Venezuelan court, get the Supreme Court of Venezuela, wherever it's called, to issue a arrest warrant, and then try to get it executed by the police there. That's the procedure you follow if you care about process.
And a lot of people are citing Noriega, and they're like, well, we issued a warrant for Noriega and sent the military in after Noriega, as if that's right, as if that was the right thing to do. And a lot of the push for an international and a world court came after that as a result of people looking and saying, oh, we cannot have countries trying their opposition in domestic courts and calling military invasions law enforcement activities. activities, right? So it's like, yes, there is precedent. And that precedent led a movement, or was part of what led to a movement that pushed for there to be world courts and international courts in order to adjudicate these things. A movement, by the way, that the United States has done everything they can to undermine, because they don't want to be held accountable and they don't want to stop being able to do what they did to Maduro and what they did to Noriega. If I was a president of any other country that had oil or mineral or rare earth elements right now, I'd be pretty worried that they've charged me with having a machine gun. And think about that. He is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of his country. Of course he has access to machine guns and explosives. That charge, out of all of the charges, just seems so weird, right? Like, it's one thing if Maduro, like, is, no, there's no thing.
I mean, he's not being charged with murder or torture or something of that nature, which many of the leaders that we support clearly have engaged in on many occasions.
And he's not being charged with any capital crimes, right? So like it's a good indication of how flimsy their case is. If they're using terrorist statutes in order to charge him, they charged him like they charged bin Laden or like they charged other non-state actors in the past, they would charge them with capital crimes. But they know that they can't prove that in court. And so they have this sort of fabricated cartel that he's in charge of that they're now admitting doesn't exist. They have these gun charges. I mean, it's so weird to charge a foreign leader with possession of a machine gun, right? Like, what is that?
Well, is that a violation of Venezuelan law? I don't even know. I mean, I presume, he's not, American law doesn't obtain in Venezuela. So you'd have to charge him based on Venezuelan law. And I'm not sure American courts are, I would assume they don't enforce in Venezuelan law. So it's right. Yeah, right. They'll just come up with it. They'll trump anything up. It's so upsetting too. I can't stand it. There's so many areas I want to go with this, Andy. The supporters, some of Trump's supporters who have, voted for him in part or made the case, hey, he doesn't get us involved in foreign wars. He's saying, make America great, America first. And then he's flailing around all over the world with, just crazy, I don't know, where you're trying to, just start tweaking leaders, arresting people.
Killing people, right?
It's terrible.
Let's remember, he killed at least 40 Venezuelans, at least 30 Cubans, right? And so if we consider this a law enforcement operation, think about that for a minute. Like, what does this mean when he starts doing law enforcement in the United States? Does it mean that the FBI if the FBI is serving a warrant on somebody else that has a federal indictment issued against them in the court of New York, not for murder, not for terrorism, not for any of those things, that they're going to kill 80 people? Like, what happens if a local police force protects somebody? What if he issues a warrant? What if he gets that court to issue a warrant for Mamdani, and the NYPD protects Mamdani? Is the FBI going to kill 80 members of Mamdani's security in detail? I mean, it's wild what he did here. And the crazy thing is, he knew he could get away with it. He knew he could get away with it. He knew that there wasn't going to be any meaningful international resistance. He knew there wasn't going to be any meaningful resistance from the Democrats. And I think he and Rubio understand that all the Latin American solidarity movements that might have existed a generation ago don't exist anymore, because they've all been folded into the Democratic Party. And all there is feckless, hapless Democrats there to challenge him. And he doesn't care. He knows they're weak. He knows that their position is BS on this. And Rubio understands how to play this game well, and has played it well. And, it's wild. I was talking to Owen, who's my running mate, who did a lot of his early activism in Latin American solidarity movements. And we were just talking about how much of that energy over the last decade, the last generation, has dissipated and been channeled into Democratic Party, channeled into opposition to immigration policy as opposed to Latin American policy, or channeled into Palestine, which is important. All these things are important, but there used to be an opposition that would have been mounting the street protests to this, that would have been mounting the protests to it. And that community has largely, that activist community, that organizing community has largely collapsed into Democratic Party functionaries at this point, or died or been arrested or whatever. And I think that, Trump knew what he could do.
240-242-5646 if you want to join Maryland gubernatorial Green Party a member who is running for governor. Andy, I also want to be very clear here because you're not the nominee. You're a Green Party member who is running for governor, I guess, as hoping to be the Green nominee to run against the current governor, Wes Moore. Why do you think, and let's make it about you, why is this foreign adventure by Trump relevant to your campaign to be the next governor of Maryland?
I mean, I put out a Facebook post the other day that said, like, this is not complicated. This is wrong. This is something that we should not do. And I was surprised by the number of people who really liked it, who may not like some of the things that we say about, or, don't love as much the local and state politics. I think part of it is that local and state politics aren't as exciting to people, and most people don't know as much about them. But a lot of people can look at this and look at the Democratic Party's responses or non-responses and realize that they're just weak, ineffective, and have no coherent values or vision. And so what I would say to anybody who cares about this issue is look at what the Democrats have to say, look at Wes Moore has to say, and look at what I have to say. And what I have to say is this is wrong. We should oppose imperialism on principle, not on practicalities, and that we need to make sure that we are calling it what it is. We're not succumbing to the desire to call Maduro corrupt, to say that this should have happened, but Congress should have been notified. All that is imperialist talking points. And if we are against imperialism and colonialism, we have to stand against it on principle and on practice. And that's a position that we will take time and time again, and we will connect with the people who are doing the good work to advance that position.
Beyond principle, these actions are almost certainly going to hurt the people of Venezuela, but also ourselves. When you create these kinds of chaotic circumstances, when you take leaders out, then there's power vacuums. There's going to be a rush for control. It won't be orderly. American corporations will likely benefit, and in the end, they'll strangle the Venezuelans to the point where they'll be a failed state, much like what the Clintons did to Haiti. We'll see a similar dynamic likely play out.
And even if we don't, we need to oppose this, right? Say that Maduro's vice president successfully navigates between keeping the socialist revolution in power and like Trump's demands of her, right? Say she does that. I don't know if she's going to be able to, but say that government is able to do that. We should still oppose this because it is the end of a multi-decade process of economic warfare and months long of actual warfare and actual Venezuelan people, right? And so the destabilization, whether this is the end of the destabilization that the U.S. is doing to Venezuela or the midpoint of the destabilization, it does not have to get worse from here for me to oppose it. And I think that's an important point to make because it is a point after a lot of history, right? And it is like the war did not begin when Delta Force moved in to take Maduro that night. The war has been ongoing for decades in economic terms and intelligence terms, and in real, the destroying of the boats has killed hundreds of people. Right. That is war. That has been war on the Venezuelan people. And we should see this as not necessarily the culmination, but as a continuance of ongoing warfare against the people of Venezuela. That is largely why there was why Chavez was able to have a revolutionary democratic movement in the first place.
100%. Everything you said there, Andy. We have seen, just to kind of digress a little bit to the 24 election, the DNC burying their postmortem, their autopsy. We don't know exactly what it would have said, but one thing we have seen, we understand from post-election polls, from talking to people, is that the Biden administration's pro-Israel, pro-genocide position cost them dearly and may well have been a deciding factor. Maybe it wasn't. Chris Van Hollen told me, he said, yeah, it hurt, probably didn't decide the election, but maybe it did. He actually acknowledged, well, maybe it did. It so discouraged young voters and kept so many people at home, Harris's pro-Israel position, that just possibly anti-Palestine position, it cost her the election. Do you think if the Democrats were willing to speak out as one, as a party, to say this is wrong, the Democratic Party stands firmly against this type of regime change, illegal action, and in fact, what I think they should be doing is writing out articles of impeachment for Trump. Do you think, and I understand the argument you're making is a moral one, it's not based on politics, but I'm making it based on politics. Would it redound to the benefit of the Democratic Party, in your opinion, if they spoke out as a party against what Trump's doing?
Part of the reason that I'm making it a moral argument is because there is no there's no possibility that this Democratic Party in its current formation is going to be anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, or against Israeli genocide, right? And so if it wasn't the genocide, it was the imperialism, right? It was all of it wrapped together. And when Kamala Harris gets up and says that we want to have the most lethal fighting force in the world, what she means is so that we can do things like Trump just did in Venezuela, right? And so, like, it is not just Israel. I think Israel is a big part of it. I think it is the vast imperialism of the Democratic Party, their commitment to it being a party of war, their commitment to being a party of colonial power, their commitment to dominating Latin America, Africa, and everywhere else. And so, like, I guess I can't envision the Democratic Party as a whole standing up against the war machine, whether it be in Israel, whether it be in Venezuela, whether it be in Ukraine, whether it be anywhere. I can't envision this Democratic Party doing that. Nothing in their political makeup, nothing in their leadership, nothing in their donor class suggests that they have that in them.
Yeah, it's very, very unfortunate. So what should people do? I mean, I say the answer, vote Green, but in a lot of places, people don't have Green Party candidates to vote for. They may not have independents to vote for. And sadly, even when we do come out and vote for Green Party candidates, it can result in false claims of spoilerism and other.
So I mean, so it's like, I think the question of what to do has to be multifaceted, and I think electoral politics have to be part of it, but they can't be all of it. And so I think we need to figure out how to build more durable and deep democratic, durable and deep democratic institutions. We have to work with unions. We have to work with protest movements. We have to work with international solidarity and trying to build these things. Like, there's a whole lot that we have to do, and we are so far from being able to do it in the current political moment because most of the energy of the left for the last 2.5 decades has been channeled into the Democratic Party, to the degree that there used to be the kind of left that would be able to mount the pressure and the amount of force across international boundaries in order to stand up to the U.S. in this case. To the degree that that once existed, it doesn't exist anymore because so much has been captured into the political sphere of influence of the Democratic Party that there is not the groundwork in order to be able to stand up and do this. The best most people can hope for right now is that Trump is consulting when he attacks somebody. And that is a result of 2.5 decades, but really longer than that, of the left being funneled into the Democratic Party, giving up its power and hoping that voting blue, no matter who, is going to be able to stop the fascism that we've known is coming for a long time. So, and
let me just jump in a couple of ironies there. First of all, it hasn't. In fact, we've seen the creeping fascism, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican in office, with the rise of the surveillance state. Responsible, Barack Obama is responsible for that as any president, with the support for endless war with Russia. We see that from Joe Biden first, and the support for Israel's genocide. So
Yeah.
we are not seeing Democrats standing against fascism at all. In fact, they're enabling it. The other irony is this has not made the Democratic Party stronger in any way. The Democratic Party is extremely unpopular, and fewer people identify with it.
The radicals of the 60s made a decision that instead of being radicals, they were going to try to work. Many of the radicals of the 60s made a decision that instead of trying to be radicals, instead of trying to fix the electoral system and break the electoral system, they were going to try to win within the electoral system, and they lost. That generation has lost a tremendous amount of opportunity for the country, for the planet, for the world, and plenty of people have died because of their cowardice. And so when I talk to a lot of those folks who are getting older now, who say, you know, Ralph Nader, X, Y, and Z, Ralph Nader is the excuse for the cowardice of them folding their political power and action into the Democratic Party. And they have used that excuse until they're blue in the face. And what has it gotten us? It has gotten us a world where Trump is as powerful as any president has ever been. Imperialism is on the rise. Fascism is on the rise. Economic inequality is on the rise. And it is because those people who had, at one point, a moment of vision of something better, of a better world, sacrificed it because they believed the power within the Democratic Party was going to be the best path forward. And they made a terrible decision, and we should all hold them responsible for it at every opportunity that we have.
Yeah, you mentioned the power of Trump. I would just know that that's largely, you said, based on the history, based on the fact that truly progressive, or at least we think they were truly progressive activists in the 60s, decided they were going to stop pushing the Democratic Party to go further left, or would do it within the party rather than from the outside. And this empowered the Republicans as well, both parties, but the centrist and right wing. Go ahead. No.
At some point, the Democrats gave up on centering their party on the people and started centering their party on how clever they were, how intelligent they were, and how complicated everything was. And once they stopped centering their discourse on the people of the United States and the people of the world, the emperor has already won at that point, right? If they are making themselves out to be the only opposition, and is all they can focus on is themselves and how clever they are and how ingenious the solutions are and how technocratic their ideas are, and they're not focusing on the people of the United States and the people of the world, then they are sacrificing the world to whatever the right wants to do, because most of the world does not prefer a situation in which an imperial power gets to rule, in which corporations get to run their lives. Most of the world prefers more socialist and communal answers, and Democrats abandoned that in order to chase the billionaire corporations and try to play this two-party game with the Republicans and the fascists, and they lost. And, I have plenty of friends who were once radicals in the 60s and the 70s and have folded into the Democratic Party. And I think those people bear a tremendous amount of responsibility for the place that we're in today. And their constant refrain of "there is no alternative" and reminder about Ralph Nader is a way that they do that. And we should, in spaces like this on the left, we need to understand that and make sure that we don't make that mistake for the next generation.
Yeah, I would just make one other point. I don't think it's even a question of the Democratic Party being feckless or not being sufficiently anti-Republican or sufficiently in opposition to the corporate elites. They've actually banded with, right? They've joined forces, right? I mean, we have two parties that are actually opposed to the American people, who pursue policies that are in opposition to what's in the best interest of the American people, what's in the best interest of the planet. So I don't even give the Democrats the benefit of the doubt. Say, well, we were fighting a different way. Maybe it wasn't the best way. Maybe we should have done this thing differently. But, Kamala was a good option and she would have been better. No, that's why I kind of wanted to ask that question. And I did ask this off air, whether Trump, and I do want to also play this clip here. This is from Democracy Now! It's kind of an antidote to those who are claiming, oh, the Venezuelans are so happy. They're dancing in the streets that they got rid of this. We're the liberator. Trump's the liberator. It's a good antidote to that. But I just wanted to, get back to that idea that, the Democrats themselves are part of the problem. It's not just that they're not good enough, they're actually bad, is the way I look at it.
In it, the Democrats are not inherently bad in any particular way, but within a two-party system, the role that they are playing is bad. They're contributing to bad results. Like, there's nothing inherent that makes one be evil because they're a Democrat or a Republican, right?
Of course.
But it is a two-party system that was designed after the post-war era in order to protect American empire, American capital, and American notions of racial progress, and to crowd out any voices that would challenge that has ultimately led us to this point. It was designed this way. It was designed to not let us, to not allow alternatives like Chavez, or, like Chavez's government, to sound viable to us. It was designed to not allow there to be space for people who say we need to be anti-colonial, anti-imperial, and we need to challenge U.S. support for Israel. It was designed that way. It's not an accident. It's not an evolution. It was by design, and as long as Democrats stay stuck within that system, all they're doing is putting a nicer face on the evil of that system.
Yeah, I might even go a little further than you. I would say that the policies that the Democrats have pursued, certainly the Democratic presidents since at least Bill Clinton, some would go back to Carter. I'm not going to do that, although I understand the argument. I would say that life for Americans and life for people around the world has been on a downward trajectory since Ronald Reagan became president, regardless of whether Democrats or Republicans are in the White House. And that the policies that Bill Clinton pursued, that Barack Obama pursued, that Joe Biden pursued, that Hillary Clinton pursued to the extent she had the power to do so, and she had power, all of their policies on balance made things worse rather than better.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear. So we're hearing from people. I see it on social media all the time. Oh, look, Trump's the leader, the liberator. If you really care about freedom, you libs, why aren't you supporting him? Here's a journalist in Caracas responding to that on Democracy Now!
Only the capital. They also found additional places in La Guaira, Miranda, Aragua. In Caracas specifically, what we have seen so far is that some electrical facilities have also been affected by U.S. bombs. And there are now at least dozens of Venezuelan communities, neighborhoods, popular neighborhoods, who are without light, without electricity, and the national company is just trying to fix that problem. Of course, it's going to be very difficult because an entire electrical facilities were destroyed by U.S. missiles. So that's what happened. Right now, what is going on the ground is that the Venezuelan people are just going to the streets in an organized way. They are protesting against the U.S. bombings. They are protesting against the kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores. Yesterday, I went to a rally that happened right here in Caracas, very near to the Miraflores Palace. People, once again, they were denouncing that U.S. bombings against Venezuela is an imperialist attack. It is an unjustified military aggression. They were demanding that President Maduro and his wife are returned to Venezuela, and they were completely rejecting the narrative that Venezuela needed to be bombed in order to supposedly take down a drug trafficking organization. That is not true in the Venezuela.
So you can see the folks there in the streets liberate Maduro, and they have like Superman or super, hero costumes with Maduro and his wife in them. And we don't know, right? I mean, we're not there. Democracy Now! I think is as straight a shooter as you're going to find who'll have this kind of interview. But it's really important to understand that when you see interviews of people saying how great this is and how terrible Maduro was, you're seeing wealthy people, wealthy Venezuelans, affluent elites who didn't like the fact that their taxes went up a lot and some of their assets were seized by the government, assets that they may have gotten because they played ball with the United States.
Yeah, I saw some interesting data on this that said that the vast majority of Venezuelans in a recent poll did not support, a military action to remove Maduro, but the vast amount of people who were in the diaspora, but people who were in the diaspora did. And so I think there's this case where we listen to folks who are in the United States or in Brazil or in wherever they are, and we give them the credibility of speaking for the Venezuelan people. And it's propaganda. Some of it is propaganda that is put on by those right-wing organizations, and some of it is undoubtedly propaganda that is put together by the CIA. The CIA has admitted that they've been on the ground operating there for the last 6 months. They have long have had ties to those right-wing Venezuelan organizations that are supposed to be the peaceful ones and things like that. And so, it should not surprise anybody that we are seeing video of people celebrating this afterwards. Now, look, let me be clear. There are probably some people, surely, who feel like this was a good outcome. I'm not denying that there are people who feel that way. I've heard from people who feel that way, and that's fine. They are entitled to feel that way. That doesn't make them right. Just because some people might feel that way does not make those people right, does not mean that we should do U.S. policy based on how many pictures of people we can see supporting that. Because, look, if I'm the CIA and I want to topple a government or topple a foreign leader, I'm going to make sure I do my groundwork to make sure that the news cameras are showing pictures of people who are excited after I do the toppling and the things like that. So I'm not trying to get into some deep conspiracy. It's all the CIA. But at the same time, we should remember it's always already the CIA, right? The CIA has always been active there. They've always been working there. They've supported multiple coups there. They've supported multiple opposition parties. And even if they're not directly supporting it, a lot of it turns out to be, we did this thing about Pinochet in Chile, or about Pinochet and Allende in Chile recently. And in 1972, there was a truckers' strike in Chile that was backed by the CIA in order to take down the Allende government. Was the CIA directly there supporting it? No, they're a clandestine organization. They have some degree of remove from that, but it is very clear to everybody who was involved that they were behind it and they were doing it to take down the government. If we understand the history of Latin America and the history of American involvement in it, we should understand that the CIA and the other opposition groups are going to make sure that there's pictures of Venezuelans celebrating after we, launch a military attack on their president and on their country. It's how you play this game. If you're going to topple a regime, you got to have the pictures of the people who are happy you toppled the regime, Well,
when you have colonialism, there are going to be people in the colony who are actually happy with colonialism. They're benefiting from it. They're doing very, very well. When you have profound inequality, those at the top, even if they're not at the tip top, but they're that layer, the professional class, the managerial class that greases the skids, makes life even easier and nicer for the elites. Even maybe household servants who are well rewarded, right, live much better than everyone else in the community. They may be very, very distraught and upset and feel that their life has gone to hell because there's a revolution. And this really came to my mind, Andy, and it's one of the reasons I think we have to fight so hard against. We lost that fight to prevent, massive tax cuts by Reagan in the 80s. The Democrats joined with him to do that, to make our society even more unequal. I'll never forget when I was in law school, I was on a journal, the Immigration Journal, and there were a number of Cuban Americans on that journal. And they just hated Castro. I mean, they were the whole regime. They were so angry and bitter. These were folks from, many from Miami. I don't know how it seemed like there was a large percentage of my class that had the Cuban Americans in my, on that journal. But they were there and I got to know some of them. And they were nice people. I don't have an issue. But they, when I said, hey, they would just talk about, we've got to get Cuba back and our land was seized and it was so terrible. And I said, did you ever think, well, maybe the reason the people, the peasants that you call them, supported Castro is because life was really unfair for them. They had very few resources. They had little or no self-determination under Batista and other American appointed leaders, presidents, dictators, whatever you want to call them. And as soon as I would suggest that maybe the previous regime wasn't ideal, they would start calling me a communist. I mean, that was it. That was the end of the conversation.
Yeah,
we're not discussing this.
And it's like, I mean, I think 1 million people have left over the last 20 years in Venezuela, and there aren't that many people in Venezuela. That's a huge exodus. And that huge exodus has occurred because when Chavez attempted to create a revolutionary state that redistributed power and wealth, the United States sanctioned them, launched attacks against them, launched intelligence operations against them, and tried to cut off the major bit of wealth, which was the oil economy that they were trying to redistribute. So, it's like, I think that there is a degree of the Venezuelan story that explains it's actually really hard in order to free yourself and your people from the empire of the United States. And the United States and your people and the wealthy people who support the United States in any given country are going to fight back against it. I think it's worth noting that this is not. I think I've said this several times, but it is continually worth grounding ourselves in the fact that there has been years and decades worth of economic warfare against Venezuela. There was an actual coup in 2002 when they kidnapped Maduro. There was they kidnapped Chavez, right? This is not new. This is not recent. This is not Trump.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you? Did you hear some audio there? I didn't mean to send it to you.
No, it was all good. It was somebody talking about the Kennedy Center.
Oh, there was a pause. Yeah, I was gonna. No, I'm sorry you heard that. It didn't go out. Listeners,
okay, well,
I have a setup here where I can sometimes monitor videos. I was getting ready to play a different video, and I was listening to Andy, and then he heard the audio that other folks didn't have. Yeah, because I wanted to play a little bit about the Kennedy Center and Trump renaming it. I was looking at that video for a second. I wanted to see if that was a video I wanted to get to. But no, let's stick with Venezuela. I didn't mean to go. So, right, there's this exodus of the people who were close to or at the top of the Venezuelan economic hierarchy, and they want to go back to it. They want it again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not just the people who were close to the top of the hierarchy. It is people who were dealing with the fact that the state was under sanction and under blockade for a long time. And so I think there are people who may have supported the Chavez government, who may have even supported Maduro, who left because the United States and the West made everything hard to live in that country. They denied the ability to use the primary export of Venezuela. And, there's a blockade, there's sanctions, and it is like understanding that this is a country that has been under attack from the United States from multiple directions for decades. Of course, people are going to leave because the United States is good at starving people. The United States is good at destroying economies. The United States is good at destroying democracy. The United States is good at these things. And the people of Venezuela who left, many of them are supporting the right-wing, pro-capitalist, pro-American folks, but many of them just left because we did a good job of destroying their economy, their democracy, and their country.
It's so disheartening. So many different ways our country is spiraling. It's circling the drain, and it's incredibly disappointing. And trying to get folks to say, wait a sec, we really have to go in a different direction. What we've been doing isn't working. And, when you celebrated in 2020 because Biden beat Trump, it wasn't like there was some sea change. I thought in 2008, I really was optimistic. You talked about people making a journey from going from being more radical to being Democratic Party loyalists. I've gone the other way. Andy, I'm not quite the age of those 1960s warriors, but, I was always, the Democrats aren't great and I've got issues with them and they should be for the progressive, blah, blah, blah. But they're on balance pretty good. They're pro-choice and they, different issues. They seem to be less warlike and they're not as keen on slashing taxes on the wealthy. So that was kind of my
Let's remember, Obama did a really good job of marketing that vision. Obama did a good job of responding to the George Bush era and marketing a vision of a different kind of politician, of a different kind of America, of a different kind of world. And then he didn't deliver on it. Right. And so, like, I think your progression is the progression of folks that is going to be important as we change this over the now, and understand that we don't have the kind of institutions in place here or in Venezuela at this point in order to withstand the kind of imperialism and the kind of aggressiveness that is going to come out of both Democrats and Republicans in the White House. We need to build that. We need to build the political power. We need to build the economic power. We need to build solidarity across borders. And we need to envision a world that is different than this one. We need to envision a world in which it is possible for us to escape this instead of succumbing to the inevitability that American government is going to crush any opposition to its worldview and to its power structure. We have to be building that. We may not get there. You and I may not see the world where this is liberated, but that doesn't mean we don't have to do the work in order to help build the consciousness, in order to help build the power, in order to help share the ideas. Because if we do something right now, it may help the people in 20, 30, 40, 50 years who are trying to build, who are still trying to resist American imperialism. Femi Tewu says that, who wrote a book called Beyond Reparations, he says that the global struggle against what he calls global racial empire over the last 500 years is going to take a long time to succeed, because it took them 500 years in order to build the level of power that they have at this point. And for us to assume that we can end it in our lifetime or in a generation or in a couple of decades or something like that is out of touch with the way the people around the world have always won these battles. But if we have a revolutionary patience that allows us to say that the work that we do now lays down the groundwork for people who will come after us, then we can start to see the importance of doing the work in the short term. And I think he says plenty of people throughout the history of the world have struggled for things that they never lived to see the benefits of. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't struggle for it. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the work. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't build the power. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't build the connections. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't envision a plural world where there are multiple outcomes and multiple possibilities, instead of just taking the one that the Americans, their media, and their corporations tell us we have to live with.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a beautiful vision, and certainly one to bear in mind. I think one of the issues that I struggle with, Andy, personally, is, as you said, we may not see it. It's a long way down the road if it ever comes, and it certainly doesn't appear that we're moving in the right direction. Why not just look? My life is good. I am comfortable. I don't have to worry. I'm one of the very, very lucky people who don't. Why not just enjoy my life? Stop doing this podcast, which I enjoy doing, but just kind of watch football and, read books, and who cares?
I took 2 weeks at the end of 2025, and I watched some football, and I took naps with cats, and I read some stuff, and I really enjoyed taking that time off. And we need to take that time off. But I appreciate that you're here telling the truth, that you're spreading the word, and that we're doing what we can to highlight the problem and the alternative. And the other option is an option, but I appreciate that's not the option you're taking.
Well, at least right now. You don't know. Maybe tomorrow I don't know how regularly you tune into Halitics, but whenever that little thing pops up that says live, you won't see it anymore. No, honestly, I'm joking. No, because I do. I mean, I'm very lucky I get to do this too. I love doing this program, but at some point there's this feeling I'm just banging my head against the wall. We're not making progress, and I see it so much. I see it, I think, more than anything else in the hyper partisanship, because everything I've been trying to do, and not just here, and I don't want this to be about me, I want it to be about you. We'll get to you in a second about Maryland, but has been to try to bring people together who have similar economic interests, may have different views on culture and on all manner of things, but who would be better off if we tax the billionaire class at 95% top marginal rates, and we tax the states over $10 million at 95, whatever, and who we didn't have war. That is what I'm trying to do. And so often it seems to fail miserably. Whether people on the left argue I pay insufficient, maybe they're right. I pay insufficient, notice to identity issues, as I call them. Some people don't like that term. That's what I call it. People on the right, every time I've made arguments. Well, Trump actually was better. I've said this. Trump was better on war. He said, I don't want, when asked, do you want Putin to win? He said, I want people not to die. That was the right answer. And then, but people are like, oh, you're being honest. As soon as I criticize Trump, they immediately go after me. So that's the most frustrating thing for me, is this failure to, I think, try to bring people together based on shared economic interest. Andy.
Yeah, I think so. There's a paper that I saw recently that said that people who are online talking about politics all of the time represent a small sliver of the people, of what people talk about and what people think about politics. And I thought it was actually a really useful grounding. And it is a thing that I find when we go to these fairs, when we go to these festivals, when we travel around the state, is that people's views about these things are complex, heterogeneous, oftentimes driven by values, and oftentimes entirely disconnected from a lot of the narratives that we hear circulating when we're discussing politics online a lot of times. And I actually, if anything gives me faith, it is getting offline and talking to people about these things, because people of all political persuasions are tired of the partisanship, they're tired of the war, they're tired of the exploitation, they're tired of the extraction, and they're tired of politicians who feel that their goal, that their purpose is to beat the other side instead of being responsive and helpful to the people. And so if there's anything that gives me hope, it is the conversations that we have that go beyond these online conversations. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying online conversations are bad. I just think sometimes this, algorithm-driven world makes us think that there is no hope, and that nobody is thinking through these things in a more complex way. And I think that there are plenty of people who are. And I think there are plenty of people who are fed up with the way that things work. I think there's plenty of people from any party who can look at what happened in Venezuela and say that is wrong. And I think there are plenty of people who know they want an alternative, but they just have to understand how it can work. Because, look, the algorithm is strong. There's a reason these are trillion-dollar companies. They have gotten the algorithm to be very powerful and very strong, and they wield it with tremendous force in order to get what they want. And while we use it, we also have to step outside of it at times and be able to have the conversations with the people who are not driven by it and who are not in the arena of it every day.
Andy Ellis, running for Maryland governor, www.gogreen2026.com. I think he should be your choice. He's my choice. Maria Green says hi in the chat. Hey, Maria. Okay, we've got just a few more minutes left. You mentioned a debate, but one of the problems that third-party candidates, alternative party candidates, whatever you want to call them, face is an inability to get on stage with the Republicans and Democrats running. Gary, is his name Simmons? Is that right? Is trying to rectify that. Tell us what's going on here, Andy.
Yeah, and I've actually, Delegate Gary Simmons from Anne Arundel County is sponsoring a bill in the General Assembly in Maryland in 2026 that will require, if PBS wants to, or if Maryland Public Television wants to continue getting funding from the state of Maryland, require them to include all candidates in the general election who are on the ballot onto the debate stage. So in 2022, when Nancy Wallace and the Working Class Party and the Libertarian Party petitioned Maryland Public Television to be in the debate, Maryland Public Television said, no, we're not allowing that. We have editorial standards, and our editorial standards say that a candidate has to be polling 10% in order to be included in the debate. Well, no third-party gubernatorial candidate in Maryland since the 1860s has gotten 10%. So they're setting an arbitrary standard that is impossible to meet. So Delegate
Can I just interrupt you real quick? Do you think that's because of the underwriters of PBS, who are big corporations, and they like things just the way they are? They don't want some guy like Andy Ellis trying to raise their taxes and tell them how they have to do business if they want to stay in Maryland?
It's a twofold thing. I mean, there's really two underwriters of Maryland Public Television. It is the state of Maryland, right, and the General Assembly, which allocates them 30% of their budget, right? So that's a big part of it. And then it is these foundations and corporations that are pushing that. Look, when Ross Perot got on the debate stage, a lot of people liked what Ross Perot had to say, and at the national level, the two parties really realized that and started restricting debate access to third parties. In Maryland in 2006, Kevin Zeese was on the debate stage and in a Senate race, and the Washington Post said he was the winner. And since then, we've seen the restricting of access for third parties in Maryland as well. So Delegate Simmons' bill is simple. And we think it's good for Maryland, we think it's good for voters, and we think it's good for public television. It says if public television wants to continue receiving funds from the state of Maryland, that when they host a general election debate, they have to include all the candidates who are on the debate state or who are on the ballot. We think that's simple. We think that means that ideas like we're talking about today have a place in the debate where they're not going to if it's just Wes Moore and some generic Republican. Because as we've said, both parties are imperialist, both parties are colonialist, and both parties are warmongering parties. And if we don't have somebody like myself or like another anti-war, anti-imperial candidate up there, we'll never talk about this stuff. So we think this bill is pretty simple. We think, as I said, it's good for Maryland, good for voters, and frankly, we think it's good for public television. At a time when public television is under attack for being too partisan, we think the best way for it to show that it is not partisan is to defy Democratic wishes to keep debates closed and to expand the number of parties who they give access to and have who have the debate stage.
Well, I think it's a great bill. I hope it passes. I was doing a little quick Googling frantically trying to find it. Didn't really find any information. I guess I have to do MG League or something.
So the Maryland, the bill has been pre-filed and it will show up on the Maryland General Assembly page in a couple of days. The General Assembly session starts next Wednesday on the 14th, and it runs for 90 days. So we will have a hearing on this bill. We'll need people to support it. You can go to our website, gogreen2026.com. We're working on the material in order to get it ready for that bill, and we'll make sure that people know what they can do to support it, because we think it's a simple democratic ask that every candidate that is on the ballot should be on the debate stage of a television station that it has 30% of its funding come from taxpayers.
I mean, it just seems so obvious, but the fear, of course, is that the Democratic Party, which controls both houses and the governor's mansion, aren't going to really be too keen on having you on that stage going after Wes Moore.
Well, let's see what happens in the General Assembly session. A Democrat is sponsoring the bill. There's a lot of Democrats in the General Assembly who are really angry with the governor right now. And this may be a little bit of a way. If you were a Democrat in the General Assembly and you want a little bit of a way to get back at the governor who screwed you over on your priorities, sponsor this bill, because it will allow, he won't like it, but it will allow other voices to be heard, and it will allow ideas that may be similar to some elected Democrats in Annapolis to have a place in the debate stage, because they're not going to be there when corporatist billionaire cozying Wes Moore is the one representing the Democratic Party.
All right. And he gave me a hard stop at 1:30, but I just real quick wanted to ask you your feelings about the override by the General Assembly of Wes Moore's veto of the reparations study bill, the reparations task force.
Yeah, so I don't have a quick answer to that, but I will tell people to go check out our YouTube page, which is Go Green 2026. We have a whole segment that we did about that on there on the day that it occurred. So go check it out. It's in the things to keep an eye on segment, and we have all of our, it's like a 10-minute segment. So I encourage folks to check that out. We're excited, to be able to have that debate with Governor Moore about that bill, but we're not talking about 2025 anymore. That's done. Bill's passed. Let's talk about what happens when those commission recommendations hit the next governor's desk. We want to do that in the debate with Governor Moore.
All right. That is, because that's where I was thinking you were going to, was the recommendations, what they're likely to be and how they can be implemented. Obviously, we don't know at this point. Andy Ellis with us on Halitics. Always great to have Andy on. He's always welcome. Go Green 6Jan26.com. Thank you all for being part of Halitics. I'll be back tomorrow. And by the way, we have Raging Centrist, I think is what he calls himself, a raging moderate. It's a good friend of mine, Steve, joining us Thursday, so you'll want to stay tuned for that. I'll see everybody.